Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our third Writing Focus Friday. I'm glad you are here. If you end up catching the replay, go ahead and type it in the chat, just replay. If you have any questions about any part of today's lesson, go ahead and put those in the chat as well. I'll be checking those and responding back to them. So we're going to talk today about 3 effective strategies to differentiate instruction, sparking joy in your students. How many of us don't want that joy radiating from our students? So we're going to talk about the 3 ways to differentiate instruction. Differentiating instruction is one of those not really well-known terms. It sounds scarier than it actually is, but it's something that really needs to be done in the classroom in order for our students to be able to be as successful as we all want them to be. So let's go ahead and focus in here on the takeaways from today. So first, we're going to talk about what differentiation is, or what differentiated instruction is. We'll talk about why we should be differentiating, why it's important, and then how to apply it to our current lessons, to our current curriculum expectations that we have, because it can be done. And then, of course, we'll talk about the final results when we do this strategy. So let's talk first about what is differentiated instruction. So it is when we provide different avenues to our students as they learn content, how they process that content, and how they produce an end product that fits their learning style and or their learning level. So we will be talking about content, process, and product today. So that is what differentiation is. It is not direct instruction, not scripted instruction, but differentiated. So there is a big difference there. I want to start by unpacking this a little bit by having you think about allergies. So I'm going to use this allergy analogy. Okay. When we have an allergy, I can speak to this completely, and so can my family members for themselves. But when you have an allergy, let's talk about a food allergy. We don't continue eating the same foods that create a reaction for us, right? We have to change up our recipes and start reading ingredients and eating different things. And maybe you're highly sensitive, so you have to be careful with what you're surrounded with. So we change everything based off of us having allergies. It's not any different when we are teaching our students. If they don't learn in a specific way, then we have to tweak some things in order to make them be successful, right? And allow them that opportunity. So let's talk about the benefits of differentiating instruction. Okay, so as we continue talking about what it is. So differentiating instruction avoids students' frustration. When we don't differentiate instruction and we put everybody in the same box and everyone is producing or going through a process, which we'll unpack in a second, but if it's the same, we create more stress. And when we have more stress, and when our students have more stress, they have less optimal brain function, okay? Also, based off the challenge that they are given, equals the speed of their learning. So if it is too challenging, it's going to affect their learning. If it's not challenging enough, it's going to affect their learning. And we want to make sure that what we provide our students is relevant to them. So all of this has to do with stimulating them, stimulating their brain, stimulating their interest so that they can produce. Okay. If we don't make learning relevant, we end up with students frustrated, misbehaving, and not able to progress. We don't want that. So let's continue talking about a few more benefits of differentiation in our instruction. We want to make sure it's fair. So when we have students in our classes of all levels, learning styles, learning, okay, how they learn, we don't want them to stand out and feel like they're different or put a target on them that other students kind of pinpoint, because that does happen, unfortunately. And sometimes we find as students get older and they learn different, they know they're a little bit different, they tend to ask, why am I not doing the same thing as the other students? That's not fair. Okay. And so we want to make sure that we are not teaching to the one size fits all. And you'll hear me say that often. But fair is when every student has the opportunity to take part in a learning experience that forwards their progress. So that is what differentiation is and why we want to use it. So now let's talk about the differentiated instruction process and break it down a bit. We're going to talk about content, process, and product. So let's do that and unpack each section. So with content, what is content? Content is basically what is being taught. It's the objective, okay? We want to, for example, if we are going to be teaching an opinion piece of writing or an expository research paper or a personal narrative, whatever the content is, whatever the objective is that we are to teach, we're going to teach it whole class, okay? But when we teach the content, we also want to have our learners in mind. So what is their readiness? What are their interests? What is their learning style? When you are presenting them the lesson, whole class, you want to prepare your instruction to make sure that you are reaching everyone, but you can do this whole class. So for example, we want to hook them into our lessons in the beginning, right? So maybe what are kids into? What is the interests of your students in your classroom? Include that in the lesson. Are they a fidgety class? Are they very active and move a lot? Maybe part of your intro to your lesson is to get them up and do an activity. So you want to have that in mind, and you want to talk about student interests and find out what makes them tick prior. And probably this is something in the beginning of your year. If you haven't done it, you can still do it, but it's something that is worth the time to do so that you can move forward as you prepare your lessons. But the content portion of this is just your objective. What is it that you are trying to teach your class? Okay, that can be done whole class. So for example, say that we are trying to have our students write a persuasive paper. And maybe this is just an example, but maybe we are wanting to persuade, they need to persuade their parent to think in a certain way. Now, they can choose what they're trying to persuade their parent, but your content is teaching them what a persuasive paper is, all the things you need to include, but that's your content. You're doing it whole class. But again, how you present this lesson, right? Have them, make them think about things that are, important to them. Is there a specific game or an object or something, whatever it is that sparks their interest? You know what kids are into because they talk, right? Include that in your lesson so you are catching their interest or captivating them. But that is what content is, okay? So just as you normally would, you would do this presentation whole class a lot of times. But the next part is the process. The process then is how students work toward the end goal, which is the product, which we'll get to in a minute. But this is the process that needs to be differentiated specifically, okay? So the process. So what I want to unpack here is if we're going back to the persuasive paper, and that is the content that is being delivered to your students. We're going to write a persuasive paper. This is what persuasive means. This is what you're going to need to include, all the things about a persuasive paper. But prior to them getting to the end product, the process then is what needs to be differentiated. So in the writing process, we know that there's the pre-write. Okay, but not every student needs to pre-write in the same way, okay? So as you can see on the screen here, each of these paper examples and these templates are part of the pre-writing process. But as you can see, they're different. In the first example, there's no detail. In the second example, there's some detail. And in the third, there is a lot more. This is just one example, but it's the process portion of differentiated instruction that needs to be differentiated. It doesn't matter how your students end up with their final product. And I'm not talking per se about the final, writing piece. I'm talking about maybe if drafting is all you're doing, then whatever it is, whatever the product is, it doesn't have to be even writing, but whatever the product is, the end goal, we want to make sure that the process is differentiated. They're still going to have an end goal. You still have an objective from the content you provided, but the process, how they get there, needs to be at their level. If you want them to be able to produce, if you want them to be engaged, if you want them to be motivated to do the work, and at the end, be proud of themselves, be successful with the assignment. And then finally is the product, and that is the end goal. That is the assignment that you originally presented to them in the content portion. Okay, in this case, the writing piece, the persuasive writing piece. So we, again, went through the content, we delivered it whole class. The process of how they developed their ideas for their persuasive paper was per their level, per their style. And then the product, then the end result, that is what you expected from them. In this case, the writing piece will then be able to be produced based off of the process they were given and allowed to get there. Okay. So there's some other examples of some products. So it could be a traditional assessment, written reports, written papers, video projects, oral reports, PowerPoint, skits, dances, whatever it is. It doesn't always have to be a writing piece. But again, it's the same idea. Everybody hears the lesson, you give them background knowledge, you give them all the things that you would as you present, okay, keeping everyone's interest in mind overall. And then the process of how they get there is everything. That's the part that really needs to be differentiated. And then they will all end up with a product. Okay, so for example, going back to this persuasive piece, they need to write a persuasive paper. Well, your below basic child or your student that's underperforming because of skills or lack of foundations or whatever the reason is, they are still coming up with their outline and pre-write to make their persuasive paper. And at the end, they have a persuasive paper, but it's probably about a paragraph with not as many details, but they have produced a product. Your at-grade level student, right, has some details and they've probably produced a longer paragraph or maybe 2 or 3 paragraphs. Your advanced student, again, we want to challenge those students as well, but their end product is probably going to be much more dense in their content, right? It's going to be a longer paper, maybe multiple paragraphs, more than 3, whatever it is, definitely more detail. But again, all 3 of them end up with an end product. And that end product was the persuasive paper. So much power in that. So I want to ask you if you have any questions at all about any part of this, if you are intrigued a little bit more and want to dive deeper into the next lessons and the next following Fridays, let me know. If you have not visited our Facebook group, you can find us at Elementary Writing Strategies as a teacher community on Facebook. You can also find our page at Created to Teach. And you can also follow us on Instagram at Created to Teach 2022. So I hope this was helpful for everybody. And I can't wait to see you in the next Writing Focus Friday. We'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.